to know her as well. Professor Carl Middleton, another Deputy Director of the programs. Professor Balaj, who is also a lecturer, some of you know him already. And we have, now without any further ado, I turn the floor to the panelists. So Jess, you may.
That was far too simple. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you very much for our warm welcome here. My name is Dr. Jess Savage, and I'm an Associate Professor in Global Sustainable Development from the University of Warwick. Can you not hear me? I'll pause. How about this? Is that better? Can you hear me at the back? Yeah, is that better? Excellent. I can hear my own voice very strangely in my ears, but we'll try and make that work. Okay, I'll start again. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for coming today. And thank you for the warm welcome that we've received from our visit and from the rest of the team. My name is Dr. Jess Savage, and I'm an Associate Professor of Global Sustainable Development and Deputy Head of School for Global Sustainable Development at Warwick. And I've been given the pleasure of chairing this session today, introducing you to some panelists, discussing the role of kind of transdisciplinarity in research and teaching, and some of the challenges and benefits that can come from that. So I will introduce the panelists first. From the University of Warwick, we have Dr. Marta Guerriero. And then from Chula, we have Dr. Carl Middleton and Dr. Naruman Tabchampon. If you'd like to join me. So first of all, we're going to be hearing from Marta, joining us from Warwick, on transdisciplinarity for global sustainable development. Marta is an Associate Professor in Global Sustainable Development, former Deputy Head of School, and currently acting as our International Partnerships Coordinator, and has been driving a lot of the development on the programme with Chula. Marta?
Thank you, Jess. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I can hear quite a lot. Yeah, it's fine? Okay. We are already on the second slide. Thanks, Bong. Okay, so thanks again for having me here to speak about this topic, which is something that I find particularly interesting to discuss. I am an associate professor at the University of Warwick, and I'm in this department called Global Sustainable Development, which is based in a school which we call School for Cross-Faculty Studies. And all we do is very much transdisciplinary research and teaching. So I'll tell you a little bit about why we do transdisciplinary research, why we do transdisciplinary teaching, and I'll give you a couple of examples of our practice at Warwick. And hopefully we can learn some lessons from our practice, both in terms of opportunities and challenges that brings. Obviously, when Carl asked me to talk about transdisciplinary research and teaching, I was like, I'm talking about transdisciplinarity to already a transdisciplinary group of students. What am I going to tell them that is new? So I'll tell you a bit what I tell my students as well. In one of the classes I teach, which is a Foundations of Research class, where we talk about transdisciplinarity. And as I was telling you, I'll start from the whats and the whys, and then we'll go a bit more into our practice. Now, obviously, when we talk about integration of different disciplines, we are very much in a contested space. There's not one single accepted definition of transdisciplinarity. And the one that we use in our school, in our department, is very much this one that you see here, an attempt to displace traditional academic disciplinary formation, an attempt to involve research and teaching that occurs beyond the disciplines, beyond the academic disciplines, an attempt to extend not just within the traditional disciplines, but also to practice, to external stakeholders, to practitioners, to end users, in a participatory manner, for example, and incorporate knowledge that is not just academic knowledge, but it might be arts-based knowledge, or it might be indigenous knowledge as well. It keeps moving, but I'm fighting it. It's fine. I put a carrot there. Why have I put a carrot? Well, because the carrot example is my best example I found in the literature of what transdisciplinarity is. So if we imagine, I like food, which is good. I'm in Thailand because Thai people like food as well. But Italians, which is what I am, do like food a lot as well. And there's very good examples with recipes. I don't know if you've seen this. Imagine disciplines are, a carrot is a discipline, okay? And we want to make some recipes with these carrots. We can go the easiest, simplest way. We can peel the carrot, chop it, and make a salad with it. That would be possibly a quite multidisciplinary approach. We can taste very much the carrot in a salad, right? We can, with a fork, we can take a piece of that carrot, and in our mouth it will taste like a carrot. It won't lose much of its identity, right? But we have added maybe some lettuce, some tomato, we've added some oils, we've made that carrot a bit more interesting. But we have still kept a quite clear division of labor. That's very much what we do when we do multidisciplinary research. We just oppose different disciplines together. We use them together collectively to analyze a particular topic, but at the same time, they remain very much the same in terms of their identity. There is interdisciplinarity instead, which is a bit more complex. We obviously increase complexity. Interdisciplinarity is when we start to integrate different disciplines together. We talk about interactions or integration across different disciplines together. So a good example could be maybe a vegetable stew. That carrot has been chopped, but it has also been cooked a bit with other ingredients. It's become a bit mushy. The identity of that carrot has changed a little bit. We have tried to integrate the flavor of the carrot with maybe the flavor of onions, for example. So when we took a spoonful, or again a fork of that stew, depending on the consistency, that will have changed a little bit in flavor. We can probably still see the carrot, but it's changed. And transdisciplinarity would be something quite different. It would be taking that carrot and make it into a recipe that almost make us lose, make us not distinguish that carrot any longer. So imagine making a carrot cake. It doesn't taste, it tastes of carrots, see, yes, but at the same time, it has lost a little bit of that distinguishable identity. So that's what we're trying to do in our school. We try to make carrot cakes, basically. Do you like carrot cakes? We talk a lot about undisciplinarity as well, when we try and transform very much, trying to go beyond the discipline. So this discourse around multi-interest transdisciplinarity is what, 50 years old, something like that, when we had quite a lot of that discussion. And in very recent discussion, there's a few authors that will talk about undisciplinarity, which is a very interesting way of thinking about this. Do we actually need to talk about academic disciplines? Right, a couple of things still, and then I might take in much longer than planned, possibly. There's two main arguments that we have, that we sort of base our ethos on when we think about why we need transdisciplinary research. The first is a very much a practical argument. When we try and address very complex problems, problems linked to global sustainable development, the ones that we call wicked problems, these very complex problems that cannot be solved, might be resolved, or might never be resolved fully with one single action. That's when we realize that individual disciplines can't work, don't help us address these particular problems. Real-world problems are much more complex and are organized in a way that academic disciplines are not enough. I put there a couple of quotes, one from a quite key proponent of transdisciplinary research, and then a quote from Ban Ki-moon that you probably already know, who talks about the need of, in trying to address these very complex problems like global inequalities, like climate change, of really in thinking and starting to think and work beyond the traditional disciplinary silos, which is not what we do very well in academia. We are trying, of course, with research to incorporate and integrate different disciplines together, but with teaching, for example, we don't do it very much. We still think about disciplines and subjects in a very unidimensional way. The second argument for transdisciplinarity is a bit more intellectual argument, and it's linked to the fact that we are moving towards more and more specialization of academic disciplines. Some would say that there are about 8,000 disciplines. 8,000 disciplines makes understanding things so complex, right? Specialization, of course, academic specializations has tremendous gains in terms of how we understand reality, but also it leads to quite a lot of fragmentation, right? Different disciplines might have different ways of looking at things. And so it might be difficult to create good communities of learning when we have 8,000 different ways of looking at potentially the same problem. And these are really the 2 points where we start from. And in our school, which is that one for cross-faculty studies, we have a few departments, department in global sustainable development where I am, then there's another department in liberal arts, there will be soon a new department in innovation by design that are non-traditional academic discipline based. When we think about these departments, we cannot really think about one single discipline. And of course, we all are academics with very diverse range of backgrounds. We've all studied different subjects. Jess works in my same department, and she's a marine ecologist, marine biologist. I possibly studied economics, but a lot of us have identity crisis, really, because I suppose I could call myself an economist, but also I struggle to call myself just an economist. And normally we give these very long descriptions of ourselves because we don't often have very traditional disciplinary formation, and all of us have very different ones. And that, I suppose, common on many departments, but in our school, it's quite standard practice that we all have studied and have formation in very many disciplines. And when we do our teaching, we do it in a way that is transdisciplinary. What does that mean? Well, it means that, of course, we have to give our students some disciplinary foundations. For example, when we teach undergraduate students, we give them some foundations of global sustainable development in the form of the 3 pillars, the economic, social, and environmental pillars of sustainable development. And we do that critically. We want them to start thinking about how economists, social scientists, and environmental scientists approach problems of global sustainable development like climate change. They have to learn how to think inside that box before they start to think outside that box and connect the economy, the social, and the environmental aspects together. So we give them these disciplinary foundations, whether it's undergraduate level or whether it's postgraduate level. They come to us with some disciplinary foundation. We critique them to the extent that they start then mixing together these disciplinary framework. And the way we use transdisciplinarity in teaching is we use this pedagogy which is called problem-based learning, which means that we address in class issues, problems. They could be real world problems, or they could be problems that we design for them to unpack, that will require them to understand how different disciplines would address these same problems together and work together. Another thing we do for them to be transdisciplinary is we have quite a lot of joint degrees, and we have quite a lot of students that study different subjects and come to us with very different backgrounds. We have top modules, because obviously we could say that we are transdisciplinary, but none of us is really transdisciplinary alone. We need some form of collaboration to become effectively transdisciplinary, because we all have some biases and backgrounds. So oftentimes we have top modules, and modules that are taught by at least 2 or more academics. We make students work in group, and that again makes it necessary for them to bring in their own backgrounds and expertise. And students become creators of research and knowledge with us, and that again helps us maintain that ethos of transdisciplinarity. And finally, we work quite a lot with non-academic partners, either by inviting them to give guest sessions or by asking our students to present their research to them. So some of our students have to disseminate their research to non-academic partners. If you have questions, I think there will be plenty of time in the panel to go through this. Have I gone through 15 minutes? Okay, I have just a couple of, and I'll give you my thoughts around what I think from our practices are the biggest opportunities and challenges. And I'll just throw them at you like this, because I only have a couple of minutes. But obviously you can talk about them a bit more in depth. There are plenty of opportunities, and like I said, I think it's really interesting to think about disciplines, because we learn new knowledge. It is incredibly stimulating intellectually to combine and integrate and go beyond the traditional way of thinking. And by working transdisciplinary, we open up new opportunity for research, we open up new opportunity for creating new knowledge. Obviously, and that's how we design our course, we want our knowledge to be very much applicable in the real life, and that's why we always start from real world problems. So the knowledge we create is often actionable. It might lead to policy suggestions, it might lead to certain forms of intervention that are quite applicable. It might give us the opportunity to create a shared language among stakeholders. Language is a big challenge of transdisciplinary research, but it's also an opportunity. Oftentimes when we speak to non-academics, we don't speak the same language. When we speak to our research participants, we don't speak the same language. And I'm not just talking about me being Italian, but I'm talking about research language, right? Understandings, interests, conflict of interests, and all that. And working together across disciplines help us trying to create new shared language. And finally, and for me that was a big thing, starting to integrate different disciplines made me think about my discipline in a much more critical way. It made me think about the limitation of my original discipline in a much more critical way. There are huge challenges. The most common that you will hear about is that you will dilute knowledge, you will dilute expertise, you will lose expertise. Like I said before, I have an identity crisis every time I try to explain my background, because I study political sciences, I did a bit of human rights, I did a bit of economics, and I got really confused by how am I going to explain this to people, but also where is really my expertise? So maybe our expertise is not in discipline, it's in subjects, it's in topics, it's in problems. Obviously, working transdisciplinary is very time-consuming, because you have to build that trust with people that speak a different language for you. You have to establish a certain level of trust. You have to break some of these communication barriers that exist. And sometimes it's very frustrating, it's very confusing, Jess is an ecologist, and I don't understand much of what she says, but at the same time, it is so complex that it makes it very interesting, but understanding a bit of the environmental sciences contextualizes everything I do in a much better and clearer way. It is very difficult, don't get me wrong, but there are interesting lessons from working together across discipline. These are my 3 lessons. This is what I've learned. Obviously, you have to be good at identify your collaborative partners, right? We're working with stakeholders from outside academia, we're working with other people within academia, and you have to be good at fostering collaborations with these people as well, because it takes time to build that knowledge and shared knowledge that I was talking about before. Effective communication, I think, is quite key. I've talked about language already quite a lot, but also understandings. We all come with our ontological and epistemological approaches, right? Our way of seeing the world and seeing reality and understanding how we unpack that reality. All of that is so complex. But the other thing I've learned is that there's no one better discipline, right? There is not such thing as a hierarchy between disciplines. There's so much literature on the social sciences war and how the natural sciences are better than the social sciences potentially in terms of rigor, in terms of the tools and the methods that certain types of natural science and certain types of hard social science implement. So these are my 3 lessons: communication, partnerships, and respect. Sorry if I took a bit longer than 15 minutes, but thank you for your time and attention. Any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Marta. That was very thought-provoking, and I like that you highlighted the, potential war of the social and natural sciences. It's a battle we have quite regularly, but it's always fun and lighthearted. Yeah, please do make a note of any questions that you've got for Marta, and we'll discuss those in the next session. But now could I invite Dr. Narimon to discuss the NOT program and her transdisciplinary approaches for teaching and learning.
Thank you. My name is Narumon Thapchumpon. I'm teaching at the Faculty of Political Science. I'm teaching comparative politics. So very, very disciplined. And during the Thai election, so now we are, well, more dilemma than you. They're saying that because I'm teaching comparative democracy. And many people are saying, no, it's not necessary. We should do comparative dictatorship study because it's too old. Well, true or not, this is another issue. Let's go to the NOT project. When Carl told me about the issue of transdisciplinary, we at the Faculty of Political Science, at the MATES program of Chulalongkorn University, we have a collaborative project. The word NOTs, which is something that you tie the knot together. The full name, can we go to the first slide? I think I need that one, sorry. Okay, so this is the full name, but basically it's the Fostering Multilateral Knowledge Network of Transdisciplinary Study to Tackle Global Challenge. Very long name. Why? Because at the time we come from the meeting with 8 universities in 5 countries. So basically that project comes from the idea of the working with the what you call capacity building for the university. So thanks to the European Union at that time, even though it still created a headache for us because they're talking about transdisciplinary, but they work really, really disciplined when it's go to the auditing. But anyway, the NOT project come out with the idea from the people who group together. In that context, it's come before the COVID. It's a 3-year project from 2017 to 2019. And in Thailand, it was Chulalongkorn University, which is under the Faculty of Political Science, and Chiang Mai University under the Faculty of social side. They are doing on the resource and sustainable development. Then we have a partner with the Vietnamese academic. So we have WAS, Vietnamese Academy of Social Science, SIS, which is the Institute, Southern Institute of Social Science, and Ho Chi Minh. This is a HCMC, is a Ho Chi Minh Open University in the Ho Chi Minh City. So basically, 5 universities from the south, 2 from Thailand, 3 from Vietnam, and then another 3 universities from so-called quote-unquote North, which is we have the University of Vienna, which is under the Development Study Department, University of Bonn, which is at that time we are working with the research project on the resort and issue of land dispossession with the University of Bonn. And then we have people from Czech Republic, so this is a child university. So we come out with the idea that, oh, it's supposed to be transdiscipline, at least we transcontinent, trans-concept, and try to involve with people that as far as we can. So if you are interested on the project, please visit the website. We put our learning experience on the website, which is including teaching manual, which is we also publish, and also the translation into Thai language and Vietnamese language of the teaching transdisciplinary. And we get the PhD student from the matrix program. They are the first batch that experience with the transdisciplinary that join our project. And after that, what we learn? Basically, when we start with the idea of transdisciplinary approach, we come out that, what is it? How do we look at transdisciplinary? I think it's similar to you as a knowledge framework. How does it different from interdisciplinary that we are familiar? How does it different from multidisciplinary? Definitely, we are really located in our discipline base. The only thing that we do, we just maybe interact with each other, and then we already say that we interdisciplinary. And also we come with a different approach to tackle on the one issue, and we think that this is come from multi or diversity of the concept. So we already said we are multi and inter, but how can we trans? We possibly cannot trans yet. We just sit comfortable in our own room and saying that, hello, we take the telephone together or meet together, but how should we approach transdisciplinary? Not only as a teaching, but how should we approach the research? How we can argue that our research project is a transdisciplinary. We just might be comfortable with our own discipline. So basically, we come with a certain character. This might be wrong. Someone can comment me. So for me, I think the key component of transdisciplinary has to be not only integrating, but transcending. Meaning, when we think about one problem from different disciplinary, from different disciplines, we have to integrate it together, and we might have to try to transcend. And I have to admit, we are not yet come over our own paradigm. We might, sometimes happily integrated, sometimes unhappy integrated, but we are not yet transcend. And the second is that we have to look at the unity of knowledge rather than the discipline. So basically, we look at the knowledge that will come out, and it has to be socially relevant issue. So that's why the NOT project select 3 issues: migration, climate change, and inequality, which is each topic is very, very difficult and very, very power, position for our group. And the last one, we look at the participation. It's supposed to be participatory research. During the NOT project, is what luckily that we get a social movement who work, they try to counter hegemony against the project developer. So we try to look at them how to participate. So in that case, it brings us with some new idea and other. So for me, the differences, I mean, of transdisciplinary from other integrative approach, for me, interdisciplinary, also integrative approach, multidisciplinary, also integrative approach. The transdisciplinary may be different in a sense that it might have to try to transgressing boundary of knowledge, boundary of power, and try to fusion. I think I like your name with the carrot cake, so try to create a new food. I mean, rather than a particular thing. So for me, I come with the food as well. When we look at salad, going to the salad bar, so this is every vegetable sit comfortably on their own, and you mix the salad. So this is for me, it's not yet transdisciplinary. And you might go to something that with a new food that come out with a new thing. So that might be able to trans, but that will be require a lot of things in order to do that. So after we come out that we have to be transcend, we have to be participation, we have to look at the problem-based issue like a social relevant issue in order to make the unity of knowledge more than discipline. So what will come out under the project? So under the project, we have train the trainer. I think what we do now, really semi-train the trainer, because we have PhD student, we have lecturer, and at that time, we also bring the lecturer to do the group work and discussion, and Carl also play a key role when we do the role play and we do a seminar. We develop our work to be the curriculum development, and we do field, summer school field trip. This is the most thing that the students like most. They would like to visit Hanoi, visit Chiang Mai, and visit Ho Chi Minh City. And in each summer school or each field school, we come with the issue in each location. So in that context, it's quite interesting that what happened and what do we learn and how we can use our transdisciplinary approach that we learn. And the last one, we try to bring in the stakeholder. And as we already see in terms of the stakeholder, so for me, the key not only the issue of problem-based, but who are the stakeholder, and that stakeholder related to the knowledge. So for me, I might consider knowledge in 4 issues. Scientific knowledge, which is we are really familiar. We have to publish, we have to go to the peer journal, we have to argue that we are scientific based. So this is a scientific knowledge. And then we go to the village, we might find out which is the local knowledge. I think when we go to the village, I'm also from the social side, with the faculty of political side. So we going to the village, we are going to the people, and they have their own knowledge. And in the past, I think this is a problem of us in the past, that we intend to see them as an object of study, or as the interviewee, which is not. They are part of the knowledge, co-production of knowledge. So we look at the local knowledge. And then we are going to the practical knowledge for those who have experience and work on the issue. The last one, which is the most difficult that we found out, is the political knowledge. And if you look at the country that we select, like Thailand, definitely under the, authoritarian regime. And then we go to Vietnam, we have to report them before we going to the village. So the political knowledge is also part of this. And the problem that we found out, I agree with our first speaker, that issue of hierarchy really strong, but not discipline hierarchy, but the power hierarchy. When we go to the political knowledge with the hierarchy of the political politician or policy maker, or those who claim that I know best, that's the most difficult, and then the village don't speak. So in that context, when we try to talk to them about the research on migration, about the research on the climate change with the dam in the Mekong Delta, that will be the issue, that how we can come out for the knowledge co-production. And I think this is the one that we already see, the environmental change, social inequality, and migration. And so for us, these three social challenges is definitely still the challenge, even now. The issue of social inequality even more stronger after the COVID-19. Issue of migration has become the key phenomenon in Southeast Asia, in Thailand, in Vietnam, and in the Mekong region. And for the environmental change, I think this is that everyone see that from the situation. So for us, this issue need more than one discipline to answer. And not only more than one discipline, but each discipline might have to dilute their own pride and try to transcend and create a new issue. So this is what our field trip. So we're going to Vietnam, to northern Vietnam, southern Vietnam during our summer school. But after that, the students who study with transdisciplinary, I asked them to do their MA thesis, try to apply transdisciplinary. So I have some students who do that in Myanmar before the coup. After the coup, it's even more difficult in Cambodia and in Laos. And also those who are studying on the issue of the research. I think this is also very interesting because when we go to the field work and looking at the research, since here I see some face of my MA student and PhD student. Using transdisciplinary research may be useful for you when you go to the field work to do MA research or PhD research. The key problem sometimes that we found out from the situation is that, this is my last slide, is that we have to bear in mind that we have to be problem focused, not discipline focused. Sometimes we intend to forget that we come out to be as an inquiry driven. So we try to inquire what happened and what kind of the research and education, and it should be contextualized in the real world problem. So we look at the issue of the problem, we try to do research using transdisciplinary approach that try to at least changing the power position in order to find out the knowledge. And the second thing, the knowledge production is hybrid. Not hybrid in terms of technology, but hybrid in a sense that it has to be mixed and it's non-linear. Nothing comes from 0 to 1. It's always back and forth, and it's also need reflexive. And I think this is the issue that why transcending disciplinary structure is very important, that we have to transcend if we want to do transdisciplinary. And more importantly, I think transdisciplinary accept local knowledge, local context and uncertainty. I think we cannot find the quick fix for all problems, I think. And I think this is a problem for my political side. This is always a problem of my boss or my university. They think that everyone can fix. You can find the virus, you can do whatever, so and so. You can solve the migration with one law, something like that. This is impossible. But anyway, I'm the minority of the minority. So I just try to talk to them that please look at the local context and uncertainty. And for us, to include various actors is very important for transdisciplinary researcher, because the more we have more actors, the more we can include more knowledge, and then we can find out the co-production of the knowledge. And for me, this is a collaborative and responsive for the problem solving. So, the research still ongoing, not yet success. I have to admit the only one research that success by using transdisciplinary is on creative tourism, because everyone feel that, oh, it's less political. Everyone can gain from the creative tourism. The policy maker happy that you can bring in, the business happy, the project developer, the local. But anyway, we still have not yet answered the issue of inequality for distributive from the project. But I don't know when it comes to the contestation of the issue, is the transdisciplinary is able to solve, because before we can try to transcend the power position is the thing that I found out is a challenge. So my challenge 1, 2, 3 to follow with you. I think we are, for me, I'm in the real world with the political position that have very different for the knowledge production that can come out. So I think this is the most important. So Pong, can I ask you to go to the website as the last one? I have a duty to promote the NOTS website a little bit. Beautiful one is supposed to be good for the EU. They are happy even though they don't pay us any longer. They said that it's the university capacity building, so we already capable to do that by ourselves. Yep. Okay. Can we see the screen of the website? Website ค่ะ Yes. ค่ะ เข้าเว็บไซต์ได้ไหมเชนจอ Sorry, it's a little bit with the technology issue. Just go to the website. Too high tech. No, we already transcend. We already try to solve the world problem, and we cannot change the screen. That's someone not supposed to do that. Oh, okay, okay. Sorry, it takes time. I will lose my 15 minutes by trying to change the screen.
Perfectly timed.
Okay. And I think this might be a project that we can do together to the website, because we are from the different continent with the new time zone. So using the website will be the best way. That right? Okay, it seems that maybe I'm going to. Okay, finally, the EU will smile, okay? Look beautiful, this is the NOT website, and if you can see, this is the website. Can you go to the student blog? So this is the NOT website. We have the teaching manual, we have the output. Can we go to the menu with the student blog? Because we are come with the student. Output activity. Yeah, student block. Going to the word student block, yes. Okay, so this is the student writing. So I hope our Warwick project will have the student writing. So each student, they visit the field trip and they write the blog. I try to ask academic paper and nobody agree. So at the end, it's come out with the student blog. So the student will write down that what they learn about transdisciplinary. So this is our PhD student, Sarah. We also have the student from University of Vienna and University of Bonn and others. So you can also visit the website. It is not necessary to, show now, but please look at this website. And I think the best thing I think this is the most benefits for the NOT project is that we can create the network. And our student, our network, our field trip is still going on. And we can do the research together. So we can co-write a proposal, doing the co-project of the research. Even though we cannot change the world, but at least we can find something in our research project. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. It was really, really interesting. Such complementary presentations so far, but taking things slightly differently. I really like your approach of problem-focused, not discipline-focused, and the power of networks in responding to some of these global challenges. So now to our third speaker, Carl, the time battle is on, just to let you know. So I will be counting. I'll pass over.
Hey, thank you very much. I probably rightly get the warning on the 15 minutes, to be honest. Okay, so hopefully my presentation will follow on nicely from these two first presentations. Also, Ajahn Narimon and I have worked closely together, and some of the experience that I have gained on transdisciplinarity is building from the KNOTS project. For this presentation, I thought I'd try and first engage a little bit with the idea of global sustainability. We were having a little bit of a discussion on this earlier today as well. In terms of then thinking like what role can transdisciplinarity actually play in approaching like global sustainability challenges, and what do we actually mean by that? In the past, I've had some form of identity crisis. I've been an engineer, I've been an organic chemist, and now teaching in political science, but I feel increasingly settled on calling myself a political ecologist now. And I think political ecology is very consistent with transdisciplinarity as a kind of an approach to doing research. So I thought I'd share a little bit on a political ecology of kind of global development, and then connect that to transdisciplinarity by thinking about like what role does knowledge production play in the way that we know the environment, know nature-society relations, and therefore, why would transdisciplinarity kind of be necessary to engage in that? And I think this very much connects to Ajahn Narimon's emphasis on the kind of the politics of all of this, that knowledge production is never politically neutral, so we have to kind of be cognizant of the politics of knowledge production in thinking about sustainability challenges. And then in the second 7 minutes, I will share on some of the experiences that we've had within our programs. So a little bit on the Center for Social Development Studies. We have a Center of Excellence on Resource Politics and Social Development. A little bit talking about the future and thinking about the politics of the future and futures literacy, and then a little bit on some of the teaching that we've done, or I don't know if we could even call a course that we run that is not strictly teaching, but it applies design thinking to approaching development issues. So I'll share just a little bit on that. So some of my environmental policy and politics students have seen this before, and probably will discuss more on this when we get the chance to interact in the course itself. I think there's like quite a profound shift in the way in which academic knowledge is understanding the relationship between people and the non-human things around us. So Ajahn Narimon already mentioned this word co-production or co-produced. This is interpreted in different ways, but I think traditionally, I guess, like the social sciences have studied social phenomenon, and the natural sciences have studied kind of natural phenomenon. And this has partly been reified within the disciplinary approach that kind of fragmented everything into silos. And increasingly now there's the recognition of this co-production of society and environment. And whether we take a environmental history perspective of the longue durée changes of our environment around us, or we think about contemporary challenges, it's just increasingly recognized that the disciplines have to be talking together to see these connections of not only the effect of society onto environment, but also the effect of environment onto society as well. So, I mean, there's so many different conceptual approaches to this, ranging from science and technology studies like Bruno Latour, to other anthropologists of a more traditional vein, to other Anthropocene ideas that I'll mention in a minute. But I think the key thing is just to recognize that this shift in the way that we recognize nature-society relations is one strong reason why we need to move away from disciplinary approaches and towards inter or transdisciplinary thinking. So probably the name or the word that you've heard a lot over the past decade or so has been the age of the Anthropocene. Anthropocene meaning the age of humans. And obviously this is a contested word in itself, meaning that the Anthropocene could be read as anthropocentric, human-centric. But I would actually not downplay the concept of Anthropocene as being a mind shift in knowledge production, at least within the academy, especially within the natural sciences, where there's like the natural sciences realize that it has to engage now with the social sciences to understand the natural phenomenon. Actually, the term Anthropocene was coined originally by natural scientists, and social scientists have increasingly engaged with it. And you can see different approaches to this. A fairly mainstream and probably the dominant approach is within socio-ecological science thinking, which essentially emphasizes the science side, the natural sciences side, and kind of uses like systems diagrams and relatively simplistic ways of approaching thinking about the way in which societies act and make decisions. And it's led to concepts like planetary boundaries, society's safe operating space, Earth systems governance, like these sorts of ideas. So working towards some form of global sustainable governance. But I think why I'd say this is a relatively mainstream approach is that the actual politics of the decision making is relatively under-theorized in these ways of approaching the Anthropocene. So it tends to be quite expert-driven. So if we think of it more as a kind of political ecology or critical thinking approach, then we'd be asking the question of who are defining precisely what is a safe operating space? A safe operating space according to who? Whose interest, whose safety is being prioritized? So I think this is also then where critical science, social science comes in by kind of deconstructing more the production of this knowledge. And then there's some really interesting alternative framings that kind of build on Anthropocene ideas, but with more critical reading. So for example, Jason Moore has emphasized, and the World Ecology Group has emphasized the idea of capitalocene. So saying really what we're seeing in the age of the Anthropocene is the age of capitalism. And so when we think about what's happening in the changing nature-society relations, it's really the restructuring of the economy, the capitalism becoming dominant, and therefore the kind of that hints also at both the critique and the solutions. Others have emphasized plantationocene, that kind of is a more historical reading of the Anthropocene, so emphasizing the legacies of colonialism, racism, and so on. So I wanted to kind of just situate the discussion for a political ecology perspective in this, to sort of recognize that the epistemologies and the ontologies, recognition of different ontologies, are starting to bubble up. And I think this is where transdisciplinarity has much to contribute in thinking about the idea of what is sustainable development going forward. Just to give a sense of the degree to which this discussion is urgent, maybe many of you would already know this idea of the ecological footprint. So, I mean, this is really, it's coming more from the socio-ecological systems thinking, but I still find it quite useful as a measure of sometime in the 1970s, humanity as a whole started to consume more and produce more waste than can be sustainably produced and assimilated within our ecological systems. I think that, to me, there's much more that we could discuss on this, and I think one thing that we should simply emphasize from the beginning is that the ecological footprint is highly uneven between countries and within countries, between different social groups. So as Ajahn Nariman's already emphasized, when we talk about ecological footprints, we need to actually situate this also within socio-ecological inequality between countries and within countries. And I think if we're really going to go deep into these ideas, then we're really thinking about ecological justice between different life forms, not just between humans alone. One other dimension of the kind of global sustainability challenge that I think we can then be engaging with in transdisciplinarity is kind of recognizing the significance of the global dimension, meaning the increasing connectivities between different places, and how these might displace certain impacts from one point to another and privilege some groups over others. So just to give one example, I've been personally quite interested in virtual water flows. So how production of food or other materials in one location that utilize water, then the commodities move from one place to another to be consumed in a second place. So how we could understand this is that the water used in one location is ultimately not consumed in that location. It is consumed by other consumers in distant places. So when we think about virtual water trade, a lot of the water is really in the food that we eat. So I guess this is following up on the theme of carrots, and in the case of Thailand, it's really rice. So if we think where we're sitting now is the Chao Phraya River Delta. That's where our university is located. If you were to go upstream, you would see very intense rice production that has intensified over the decades for the last 100 years. So it's been intensified by new crop types, it's been intensified by infrastructure, by building dams. But that kind of water storage and water management has largely facilitated Thailand being one of the largest global exporters of rice. And it's somewhat ironic that, or bitterly ironic, I would say, that most years there's water shortage, there's water scarcity. The city of Bangkok regularly faces in the dry season seeming water crisis where your drinking tap water might become a bit salty. So if we understood this in a local sense, we'd say, well, that's because there's not enough water available. But if we take this wider, more complex perspective and connect the processes of globalization, the nature-society relations in a more connected sense, then we'll realize it's connected to public policy, economic trade and incentives, exports of rice that reduce the social availability of water in Thailand for local uses. So I find that transdisciplinarity actually help us make these connections in engaging in complex issues, as Ajahn Naramon has kind of framed it. So then, to just bring this around to political ecology briefly, to emphasize the political dimension of ecology and sustainable development, political ecology, the idea that I find most useful about this is understanding environmental change and issues through the lens of power relations. And in the context of the discussion today in global sustainable development and transdisciplinarity, one strength of political ecology is to kind of see these global connections between point A and point B, whether it be the demand for sugar in Europe incentivizing a land grab in Cambodia, or a coffee crop failure in Latin America, increasing crop prices and encouraging coffee growing in this region. Political ecology can help us see the connections. I think political ecology is somewhere between an interdisciplinary and a transdisciplinary field. It's interdisciplinary at a minimum, in the sense that a lot of political ecologists are really trying to see these connections between ecological, social, and physical phenomena and draw them together. But as Ajahn Naramon actually was already emphasizing, a lot of, and actually as was mentioned in the first presentation as well, a lot of the research that's being engaged with in a transdisciplinary sense is derived from a feeling that something's not quite right in the world, and there needs to be some things that require to change to be more socially just or ecologically just. And I think that's what underpins the motivations of a lot of political ecologists. And in that sense, political ecologists tend to work within networks that are not just with academics. So they may not have labeled this as a transdisciplinary approach, but the political ecology often necessitates them to connect with social activists, community movements, social movements, and so on. One writer who I like, who's written on this, is Alex Loftus, who's written on water politics in London, as well as global trade issues as well. And he kind of draws out, he argues for the idea of a kind of a political ecology praxis, where a part of the knowledge of political ecology is kind of gained from the frustrations and the engagements of social activists with the institutional systems, so, which is a way of knowing through experience. So for example, just to give us a very tangible example, at this very moment we are consuming. We are consuming electricity through aircon, through electricity, through electronic devices and so on. And political ecologists would kind of ask a question, well, where's all this coming from, and what are the socio-ecological injustice consequences of us having this seminar today? So in the context of Thailand, the energy is coming partly from gas, partly from coal, partly from hydropower, including imported from neighboring countries such as Laos. And also increasingly, there is a transition to forms of renewable energy like biogas and biomass that also actually do have some social ecological dimensions as well that could be understood as justice issues. Political ecology tends to have this framework of hatchet and seed. What are the problems? But then also, what are the directions to overcome some of them? And I think there's already been an emphasis on the panel of maybe not solutions, but at least trying to work towards making things better rather than absolute solutions, as if they exist perfectly. To situate transdisciplinarity then, in our way of thinking about our relationship between nature and society, a part of how we engage within nature-society relations is what we know of the environment. So actually knowledge production structures our sustainable development understanding. And we could ask questions like, well, in the case of environmental knowledge or sustainable development knowledge, what knowledge is being produced and by who? What categories are being created and by who? How are certain kind of sustainable development tools like environmental impact assessments actually conducted? Environmental impact assessments are designed to be bringing knowledge into decision-making processes, but are they genuinely inclusive and participatory? And ultimately, as Sajjan Nariman emphasized, whose ontologies and epistemologies are dominant and whose are marginalized in our ways of thinking about this? If we situate this discussion within science and technology studies, then there's Sheila Jasonoff's work on the kind of the co-production between ecological knowledge and ecological governance. And I think that's quite a useful way of thinking about this. Actually, in any governing process, knowledge is kind of a key process in itself of production. It also is a key way of informing the way that decisions are taken or masked in the way that decisions are taken. And there's lots of ways that we can deconstruct that knowledge production. So the way that I then think about transdisciplinarity as an opportunity for thinking about global sustainable development is how can we engage in this knowledge production at the intersection of governing and sustainability challenges to really kind of restructure the outcomes and the process. Maybe I'm going to be quick because I can see the time's up. Similar to the other presentations, I think crucial to this, and this is what we, in a more applied sense now, the types of projects that we're trying to undertake in terms of research and teaching has started from recognizing that a shared approach means a shared understanding on what is the problem. So it means actually going through a process of working with practitioners, with civil society, with other actors to co-produce the problem and have a shared understanding on it, leading to shared, commonly defined research questions rather than the normal approach to research, which is the researchers are the experts, the researchers produce the questions. So it's kind of it's actually a very crucial to this, it's a very fundamental shift in power relations where the researcher becomes one of a group, of a team, rather than being that one is seen as leading and defining the research process. And then there's a range of different research strategies that we can take towards integrative approaches. And I like the word that Marta mentioned, the idea of working towards actionable knowledge. A lot of the work that academics produce is not really actionable in a policy or a practical sense. It produces conceptual knowledge. But I also strongly feel that we shouldn't downplay the contribution that conceptual knowledge contributes. Conceptual knowledge helps us see the big picture, understand deeply, transfer experience from one place to another. So the way that I would think about transdisciplinary approaches is actually the simultaneous production of actionable knowledge and conceptual knowledge at the same time, so that you're furthering the generalization whilst also at the same time working towards better understanding problems and finding better ways of approaching them. So in the last couple of minutes, I can just share a couple of examples. I'll be really brief and I'm happy to answer any questions on this. Some of the research that we've done at CSDS, one of our early efforts was based around the co-production of knowledge, working with dam-affected communities in northeastern Thailand, trying to negotiate better solutions post-project construction, 20 years down the line from the project actually being constructed. And this was a collaboration with Ubon Ratchathani University. I won't go into the history of the project, which has a very long and contested process, but what we tried to do was a co-production of knowledge between researchers, community movements, and local government to try and find livelihoods options that matched the locally defined needs in that current context. And actually, I think one thing that I would emphasize here is that I don't think that transdisciplinarity by definition means that everybody has to work together. I don't think that's politically feasible or actually necessary. I think better to understand it, the transdisciplinarity means multiple knowledge-producing actors that have a shared enough interest and a shared enough trust coming together to work towards an agenda, rather than some idea that everybody can, in some utopian form, always work together under all political conditions, which is not possible. So in this case, we found that we could undertake knowledge co-production to a degree. We developed an educational tourism project, but the idea of wetland zoning was not possible in the end because it was too contentious, too hot. We tried to do, this isn't necessarily strictly transdisciplinarity, but another research that we did tried to recognize the plural ontologies of knowing the Salween River, which is a river shared between China, Myanmar, and Thailand. So this research project involved mentored research, writing and research workshops, policy briefs, blogs, public forums. But what we were really working towards was plural ways of knowing the river. So the book that we published in the end and all the other stuff that we did simultaneously had civil society knowledge, practitioner knowledge, and academic knowledge alongside and interacting with each other in the publication that we produced and the other engagements that we did. Recently, we've launched this Chulalongkorn University UNESCO Chair in Resource Governance and Futures Literacy. Just to be really brief on this, I think one thing that we've recognized in engaging in resource politics in this region, but I think it applies more widely, is that more attention needs to be paid towards the way in which futures are being imagined and whose futures are kind of constructed in development plans of different types. And so this chair is wanting to look at how the politics of imagining the futures acts on the politics of the possibility of the present, and to really emphasize the marginalized discourses and marginalized visions in the work that we will do. So we've looked at commons, climate futures, and mobility and climate change so far as complex issues that would benefit from these different ways of thinking about futures. And last thing, in our talk program, some of the students in this room are bravely engaged in the current course on innovation for inclusive development, where we've tried to apply the concept of design thinking, empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. So design thinking essentially is a process by which any knowledge production that's undertaken towards finding better ways start from really understanding the challenges that are being faced by the local community or organization that is being worked with themselves. So what it's trying to do is bring together the design thinking that is maybe more coming from business studies with innovation for inclusive development that's more coming from development studies, and building from the idea of participatory development to really bring in innovation as the new approach. So we've done we've been running this for 8 years. Ajahn Nariman was actually instrumental to making this happen. It came from a regional Southeast Asian project originally, and we've kept it going. There's been a range of different types of projects that we've undertaken. I think why I say the students are brave when they start is for 2 reasons. One is that they don't know the project that they'll be doing when they begin, because it's supposed to be defined by the group that they work with. And the second is that it really emphasizes rebalancing the power relationships. So the students cannot see themselves as bringing the solution, but rather engaging in a partnership and listening, and then undertaking supportive work that will collaborate with the group that they're working with. So I'm happy to discuss more on this in any question and answer. So in summary, I think transdisciplinarity engages with real world problems to create actionable knowledge, but should also further conceptual understanding. I think political ecology as an approach helps us grasp why transdisciplinarity is of value and how the politics of knowledge fits into the governance process. And I think that there is this exciting and important growing body of evidence on how transdisciplinarity can work within boundaries in research and teaching in Southeast Asia and beyond. And that's it. Thank you.
We're back on. Thank you very much for that. Definitely lost the time battle, I'm afraid, but I think it was worth it. I particularly liked your comment about ecological justice between life forms, and it got me thinking about themes of intra and interspecific competition, but also inter and intra-specific justice, which I think is something very underlooked at the moment. So I'd like to open us up for a panel discussion. Are there any questions from the floor to get us started? Anybody brave enough? Yes, at the back. We'll have a roving mic. I think that's probably easier.
Yeah, first, thank you so much for the really interesting talks. I was wondering how the results of your interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary research projects that kind of elaborate solutions for real-world problems are received, because you were talking about the fact that while working with each other in the space of academia, sometimes it is hard to kind of meet on the same level and to view different disciplines as bringing different but the same value to the table. And I was wondering if you kind of create some policy recommendations, whether you feel like when they build a bit more on a specific discipline that they are received better, or if you feel like your transdisciplinary research has a value that is also recognized by the stakeholders that you present those policy recommendations.
Lovely, thank you for that. I'm going to pass the mic to my right.
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure whether I can answer all, but I did the research on COVID-19 and the impact on migration. I try to apply with the transdisciplinary approach to the research, because basically it's looking at the migrant community. So basically it's not the academic that will answer. So their knowledge, and we found out something. First, what we are really found out, the first challenge that we found out is the issue of nationalism. Because many of them are unregistered, undocumented, so we have to change the perception of those who do the research that first, you need to build them the trust, because otherwise they will afraid that you will report to the police, will be arrested. Second thing, when we come up with the policy, we have to make sure as well, because I think we are academic, we will have to look about the ethical issue, but as a policy, because we want the Thai government to change the policy to the migrant worker in the context of the COVID-19. And we want to change the perception of medical practitioner to see that the virus is no nationality. So to kill the virus is not based on nationality. So in that context, if we have, first we do the perception. Second thing, we bring in some local knowledge from them. We found out that a lot of the herbs and medicine also help them, especially when we first face the issue of the scarcity. So in case of Thailand, the most successful is the migrant health volunteer. They are the migrant worker, they have a certain of the local knowledge to at least reduce a certain impact of the problem. And second, we don't have the problem of the food scarcity, because the issue of sharing and caring was able to answer. And in that context, it's not only you going to the hospital, get the doctor. And at the end, in that case, the health ministry already agree in terms of to change the policy toward the migrant. Even now, in the beginning, it's still difficult. They will see that this is the Thai government budget, we should pay to the Thai citizenship for the vaccine first, but at the end later it changed. But it takes some time, and I think we cannot do as a whole policy. Maybe just only a pilot study with one project, and then we apply. And I think the context in the case of the migrant community in Samut Sakhon at that time was considered quite a success with the also entrepreneur, with the business sector as well. So in conclude, transdisciplinary, not only the knowledge, but also the integrative and creative design, how to bring in a different knowledge and different stakeholders to come together. And I think in that thing, and we should not mind that they will claim their credit. I'm fine, just claim the credit, as long as you change the policy. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. And did I see another hand?
Kind of going off of what Ajahn Naraman was just talking about, I was wondering more about how to implement a transdisciplinary approach, like when you're trying to like conceptualize the problem that needs to be fixed, or like early on in the planning stages and like framing, because I feel like it's relatively easy after you've like already established what problem you want to do, then like in reaching out to other actors and collaborative disciplines. But I was wondering, like in your own projects or in your teaching approaches too at university, like how you've incorporated a transdisciplinary approach like in the planning process.
It's a good question. It's kind of a chicken and egg question, right? Like which comes first, your interest or the idea from the ground? And I think the answer has to be that it's iterative. If we look at the Innovation for Inclusive Development module, the starting point of the kind of small group project would be, well, what general issue is the group interested in working on, broadly defined? And then from there, a discussion can go forward, say, well, if as a group we're interested in the topic of community tourism, then where might we be able to be engaged? But I think it becomes a very tricky line then between kind of forcing the topic of community tourism as being the issue and the problem that will be worked on, versus taking that as a launching point and then being open to the possibilities beyond that. And I think there's two, well, one issue that comes up, there's partly a response to the previous question, that often when researchers come along, community leaders or practitioners often expect the expert academics to be bringing the answers and the solutions. So there's actually a kind of an assumed hierarchy of who's supposed to be bringing knowledge into the equation and actually defining the problem. And so it takes some effort to actually take a step back and say, no, our process is not to define the problem for you, but to understand it together. And I mean, just in the case of the Innovation for Inclusive Development project this time, we thought it would be community tourism, but it seems that it will actually be now working on the problems that a community face around plastic waste in the marine environment. So it's kind of having the flexibility to then say, well, actually, we'll respond to what the actual need is, not the need that we thought. So that's kind of a measure of humility from the researcher, I think, as well. And yeah, like repositioning what the researcher does.
May I add a little bit? I think when we framing and planning, I think the first thing, this is always the problem that for us as an academic, when we go down to the field, we already have something that we would like to inquire. We think that this is the truth out there we would like to find out. But maybe in that case, we might have to step backward. Because when you go to the field, maybe they will be the one who create agenda. And I think this is always the problem of social science. I mean, science, they already have their problem. They always think that they are in the laboratory, find everything and answer, but I think they change. But for social science, sometimes we have that kind of what you call unintentional feeling, but we intend to think that, oh, when we go to this problem, this is the issue of, for instance, develop or underdevelopment, something like that, and we intend to, I mean, deep down in our consciousness, we just think that it's supposed to change this and that, maybe not. Maybe first thing we step backward and ask them to be the one who create agenda. You will be what you call the facilitator, even though you have your intention in your mind that you might try to navigate the issue. But in that case, the first thing, they will have the feeling of ownership. And the second thing, the thing that the project that they will do together with us will be the project that they would like to find an answer together. And I think this is a key success in framing. And then after that, the academic knowledge and other will come out. Will be the key role. I was an activist before, turning into academic. So I always have a feeling sometimes when we go to the academic is that they just fly by airplane to the village and then they have a certain answer with questionnaire, a certain program with gizmo and so with so many things and come out with a lot of mathematics and answer. And that's maybe without intention, it creates a certain hierarchy and it gives some favor to a certain stakeholder. And so in that case, especially when we are in the research, that very contentious, such as, should you protect the fish or you should allow the electricity to the dam issue? Or you come into the very authoritarian manner of the leader and then you see the people who are not, I mean, so for you, you might have to thinking how to do that. And I agree with Carl that we possibly cannot bring everyone in one room because then you will find out that those who have more power, more character will dominate the talk. And in that case, maybe framing might have to do 2 or 3 times and then you are planning later.
I mean, I was going to basically do a synthesis of this contribution in the sense that, you have to do that stakeholder mapping, right? The political economies analysis. Who are your stakeholders? What are their interests? But you have to do it in an iterative way. You have to keep doing it as you move from the bigger issue, as you narrow down to your problem, and you finally define your questions. And obviously the stakeholders as well narrow down as you narrow your focus down.
Lovely, thank you. Another question from the floor? Yeah, absolutely. And then we'll come to the back.
First, thank you for your lecture, and I wanted to ask you if you have experienced any drawbacks in doing transdisciplinary research.
or no
like
answer.
problems that might arise by doing transdisciplinary research.
Well, I'm not sure whether it's called drawback, but it cannot find an answer, something like that. Let's use this way. We try to do with the transdisciplinary, and for instance, they have a certain context that we cannot come over. One example that I found out is an issue of gender. I mean, for me, I'm from the middle class and in Bangkok. So in some time, we found out that we never realized that when we go to the certain area, they have very, what you call, issue of very strict gender character, something like that. At that time, we try to talking to the women who are working as the villager in the village, and they don't want to answer. They said they will wait for their village leader. And then my student, similar to you, or the girl just like not happy. So at that time I have to manage my student who are not happy with the situation and see that this is an issue of the gender. And then we also have to dealing with the villager, which is they already have their strict, I mean, whether we agree or disagree, this is a context that happened. And at that time, we have to admit that at the end, maybe we should not do transdisciplinary on this topic. So they have a certain topic that is drawback in a sense that, so why don't we just do maybe only multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary to make everyone, I mean, comfortable to answer. So at that context, I have to do like a separate interview. And in that case, even we do stakeholder mapping, certain stakeholder might have to do separately. So at that time, I learned how to do cooking in order to talk to them separately. Start by the issue of the cooking, not issue of the dam. So they may have a certain limitation, such as if they consider this is a private sphere, this is not a public sphere, so the public sphere will be the village leader to talk, but if you are going to the household issue, in the family, it will be private sphere, they will feel comfortable to talk. But I think at that time, you might be able to find an answer, but may not with transdisciplinary approach.
Well, I suppose you might find the answer, but it wasn't the one necessarily you were looking for.
Yes, that's true.
Excellent, thank you very much. Marta, do you want to add?
Sure. I mean, I'd go back a little bit to what I was saying before as well. I can give you an example of actually in my class when I, at the start of the seminar, asked my students, what do you think is what exemplifies transdisciplinary research? They would say collaboration. By the end of the class, they would say communication as being the biggest challenge. And that goes back also to your point before about communicating solutions. And it's the issue that I was talking about before, the fact that the moment you incorporate more stakeholders and more people that have different views and different backgrounds for you, you are making your life harder, obviously. But then at the same time, because you're doing all of that background work in terms of finding that shared language and finding that shared understandings, it might become also easier at the end to communicate your results. So I suppose it's a challenge and an opportunity, the issue of communication.
Carl, I'm going to get a response from you as well, if that's okay, just because it feels like a good topic for everybody to voice their own experience on.
Okay. It is a really good question. I mean, I've got a little bit of a list here, but I mean, some of them are a little bit more practical. I think increasingly there's funding being made available to do transdisciplinary research, but in the past that was not so much the case. But I think that if you apply for funding to do this type of research, it's actually very difficult to put a proposal together because the funder wants to know what they're funding. And if your transdisciplinary approach is basically saying, well, we will find out as we do it, then that's not really a way of defining what will be delivered in the end. So I think funding, like actually there are models that I think are being developed, like the Stockholm Environment Institute, that have a way of running projects as co-produced knowledge that I think are flexible enough to do some forms of transdisciplinarity. So like the model is shifting a bit. I think also it's time consuming and messy. And if for the academic side, like if we're to be honest about the expectations of the academic world, you have to publish. And the kind of the pathway of going through a transdisciplinary project is not always systematic in the way that a traditional research project research will be published. But I think again there are journals that are kind of open now to transdisciplinary methods and inquiries and complex issues that are not defined by discipline. And this may sound small because it's kind of the world of academic, but actually to make these things happen, if it's transdisciplinarity involving academics, it does, the structures of academia actually matter to making these things happen. I just say the other thing is the work that at least we've done so far with CSDS is really built on long-standing relationships. Like I've been working on kind of water politics for quite a long time. So in a sense, it makes transdisciplinarity easier because I'm kind of a part of networks I can work within. But then also my positionality is also known, I guess, as well. But I think the challenge then is how to kind of position the research in relation to policy and political agendas and to kind of make clear I think the lines are super gray. When you actually produce this type of knowledge, the lines between policy knowledge, actionable knowledge, academic knowledge become increasingly blurry. But I think that's also a challenge, again, because a lot of academia wants to be more black and white on what counts as academic knowledge. And maybe the last thing is just, there have been instances of meeting experts that don't do transdisciplinarity that you want to work with and trying to kind of introduce this new way of doing things that can kind of threaten the identity of being an expert can be quite challenging sometimes. I think
that's a lot of interesting points, and I think one of the key things that I've experienced as well is, you mentioned earlier the importance of kind of knowing where knowledge comes from and the expectation that academics bring the knowledge, but if an academic output doesn't facilitate transdisciplinarity through the publish or perish mantra, that's actually a really systemic problem. Key, before I come to you, did I see a hand right at the back of the room? No? Yes? No? Okay. Key.
Hello. Thank you very much for the discussion. It's very interesting, particularly I would like to share a little bit of my reflection and also maybe come later with the questions on the participatory research we are talking about. Of course, like in transdisciplinary research that we are talking about, we bring a lot of stakeholders into the discussion of how we can solve the problem, but I rarely see people mention the community themselves, which they are facing the problems. We often talk about bring different disciplines on the table and talk about the problem. I mean, there are different levels of participatory that we are talking about. You can do participatory research by using participatory tools. But does it really mean, is it really participatory to solve the problem? Because, I mean, everything is participatory. Even you have an interview, it has to be participatory because you are not talking alone. But sometimes we just thought that we are using participatory tools, and that is participatory already. And then it came back to what Dr. Naruman was talking about when you have to involve the community into the planning or like designing the agenda of the research that we are doing. I think for me, I think it's more sustainable in that way because we are solving the problem of what the community is facing. So my question is, at the university level, how much did you encourage students or facilitate students to do that. I mean, are we still doing the same? We design like research question with group, and then we go to the community, or I mean, sometimes we have to go to the community first and then to know what's going on before we write a proposal. But most of the time, I mean, in academia, we need a proposal first, and then we go on the field, and then, I mean, you already said what you are looking for. So I'm wondering, at the university, is there any policy or is there any framework that you are doing to encourage or to facilitate such research? I'm not saying that other types of research it's not good. I mean, it's all good, but this particular research, do you have any things like lesson or encouragement or policy to support that? Yeah, sorry, it's quite long.
Well, I have two classes. The first one called critical issue in development study, like a critical issue. So when it's called critical, we are able to use that. But definitely very few students register. They're saying that life is critical enough. And we come out, so in that case, we have a student who joined the class, so let me give a story. So, and we ask the student to go to the field. So the first group going to the issue of the fishery, traditional fishery community, to look at the problem. They face the IUU issue, and also they have to change. That one is quite a success, in a sense that now develop, I think, with Orapan project, with CSCS project, to look at the issue of the community-based tourism, not only to do the fishing and they change the position. But the key success of that project was that they feel that they have to come together, they have to find out, and maybe this is the already problem that we found out. So the key issue is that the community and the student maybe share the same interest, in a sense that they would like to find out to solve that problem. And the student also don't know anything about fishing, so they are not the one who like an academia to try to answer, but they know canvas, they know, marketing program, they know how to make this issue to be on the online platform. So in that case, it's kind like a share knowledge. The second group looking at the migrant school with the Burmese community in Bangkok. That one not success at all, because they have to come out with the Sayama, who are the teacher with the hierarchy. The teacher doesn't want to change. And then it have to deal with the Ministry of Education of Thailand, who also saying that you cannot teach. Do you have any degree on education to teach the migrants or something like that? At that time, it's a kind of drawback with your word of transdisciplinary. It's just a group of several disciplines to help and try to solve the problem with the migrant school, but not with the transdisciplinary, because we already found out with the different position of power, issue of legality, and the issue of knowledge. So in that case, whether the two groups, do the student found answer? Yes. But both groups have to come out with the different methodology. Do they have participation? Yes, they do participate, both. But the type of participation are different. And I think this is the thing that may know. And we also have to find out, because I cannot do with a big group of teaching. My faculty will not allow me to do. And I have to submit the grade by 1 month. So in that case, only the seminar class that can do. Will the political side will change? We smile. We are also from the political side. Very difficult. Because each faculty always have their own pride of discipline. And they have to answer, this is our expert. Something like that. This is a certain expert. And to go back to I think transdisciplinary the both benefits of transdisciplinary is the process of study, is a process of finding the knowledge, not the production of knowledge, which is not what academic want. The academic want the product, right? How many paper you will come out, how many answer that you will find. They may not want us to spend so much time with the process. I mean, and if you already see several, peer review article, I don't know how many articles allow you to write more than 2 paragraphs on the methodology process. No, right? They want you to give the finding, and I think it may be us to have to change the academic world, I guess.
Okay, just really good question. I think in development studies, participation is the kind of big turn of the 1980s, right? And I mean, two thoughts I have just briefly on that. One is, I do think that participation, like Robert Chambers' idea of putting the last first and so on, was significant to a world of development studies that was expert dominated. Because if you kind of look at the underpinning theory behind participation, it's basically saying there has to be an ontological and an epistemological shift to acknowledge that local knowledge counts in thinking about development. So I think the significance of participation conceptually was important. But then I also think it's not kind of a black and white thing. Like from the 1950s, there was Einstein's ladder of political participation, from tokenism all the way to transformation. So we could also ask the question of, well, how deep is the participation, which I think is what you're getting at. We've tried to kind of shift towards deep participation and transformation in the Innovation for Inclusive Development course by trying to go beyond participation as framing, by bringing in design thinking as the method. So in other words, it's not just about the knowledge, but it's about whose voice is heard and how it kind of defines the problems and finds the solutions. So this is what we've tried to do. I think it's kind of it's a small scale thing at the moment, but that's how we're teaching it. I think it's quite challenging if you're the master's students thinking, how do I do a transdisciplinary master's thesis? It's quite difficult because of the timeframes, at least for our students. But I think maybe for PhDs, it might be more feasible, because methodological innovation or methodological research is knowledge production, right? So designing your research around producing new methods, transdisciplinarity, is actually a contribution to knowledge in an academic sense. So I think maybe for the bigger projects, like the PhDs, like the one you're doing, methodological contribution is actually a significant outcome of the research itself. I think I'll just leave it there. Thanks.
Lovely, thank you. I mean, we are swiftly running through our time, so I think we've got time for 1 or 2 more questions. I have had my eye caught from over here, so if anybody wants to think of a last question while we're here from this side of the room, then we will close the session and go to mingling.
Okay. I think my question is going to be more just interesting to me and not so much necessarily to other people, but I'm going to come in from the other side. And when we're looking about transdisciplinary research, how do we avoid it making it too practical? Because real people in the real world want solution to their real world problems. But from an academic perspective, sometimes solving the smaller problems is not the solution to the larger problem. If anything, it's antithetical to the solution. So how, in a transdisciplinary context, how do we reconcile that many participants in such a process would want solutions to their immediate problems, but that might not be able to be solved without deeper conceptualization of something like the capitalist world economy or an infinite system of the world that is beyond what they are looking for?
Excellent question. So I've been really interested in this so-called integrative approach to knowledge production, which recognizes the rationality as to why different actors would come in to work together. So I think the answer to the question, the answer to this challenge is to recognize that academics in coming into a research process have to also satisfy their own needs, in a sense, of producing the conceptual knowledge, simultaneously with satisfying the needs of other actors where the closure to the problem is the goal. Because academics make work for themselves essentially by producing more questions. At the end, a good research leads to more questions rather than question closure. So I think the short answer to it would be to simultaneously acknowledge that academics' role is to keep on asking more questions and conceptualize, whereas practitioners need the closure to engage in the project in the first place. But then also to recognize, as Ajahn Nariman mentioned, political knowledge, practical knowledge, scientific knowledge, and what was the other one? Local knowledge, situational knowledge. So all, if in the sustainability science way of thinking about transdisciplinarity, it's the assembling together of those multiple knowledges that can help us solve or work towards better understanding and finding forms of solutions to complex problems. So in that sense, like the academics' recognition of the problems of the global capitalist system to understanding land grabbing in northeast Cambodia actually does bring strategies for finding problem closure, like legal strategies to solving land grabbing. So it's kind of recognizing the strengths and limitations of different types of knowledge, plus acknowledging the different reasons why different actors would be involved in a transdisciplinary research method, I think.
This is always the problem of the academic or when we work with the PhD, right? The last answer is that, what are your theoretical contribution? But when we talk on the transdisciplinary concept or approach, is the process of to find out an answer, rather than have the, what you call, quick fix answer or a certain way. But I think it's also the role of the academic as well to find out, how we can conceptually carving from the phenomena, because what we use basically in transdisciplinary, we're looking at the phenomena and the challenge and the risk that happen on the world. And we try to bring in different discipline, different expertise, and different concepts to try to tackle an issue. For us, I think we cannot avoid and we should not claim that we ourselves can transcend by ourselves. I cannot claim that I will know anything from the science if I work with the medical team for something like that. With sociologists, because I'm trained political science. We cannot claim that as a theoretical contribution, we should not claim that we will have theoretical knowledge based on that process. But what we can do, at least from my understanding, we as those who train a certain discipline, how do we conceptually carving from that process? For instance, for at least we might be aware rather than jump to a certain conclusion or jump to a certain theoretical contribution without finding or without aware that this is an issue. And that's also, I think this is also the challenge of academic. The challenge is not only we have been in a certain discipline, but we already been prepared and trained to create our expertise. But yes, we are finding that the world is more complex and one discipline cannot answer. And for us, I think the key challenge is not, we do not intend to be more practitioner, but rather in that context is that we found out a certain limitation of our own discipline training, that our discipline self, our own self-discipline cannot answer. So what should be next for us if we want to create a certain contribution from our discipline to answer a really complex situation?
Wonderful, thank you. Do we have a last question? Anybody brave enough? Okay, I'm going to take the sea of staring faces and ask my colleague and head of department, Stephanie Panakeli-Bataya, to come and give us some closing remarks on her reflections on the session.
Excellent. So I'm going to keep it short because I'm aware of time and I can imagine that you're all ready for a break. But I've taken some notes that I'd like to share after, I think, three very interesting presentations. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for welcoming us today here. It's a real pleasure to be here, and we have a full program that has been exciting, and we really look forward to talking to you now after this, after a short break first. But I think what was really interesting and that you heard from these presentations is the complexities that we encounter when doing transdisciplinary research and teaching. And that starts with the confusion of what transdisciplinarity is. And hopefully after today, you have a better understanding of what that is. I think that the example of the carrot and the carrot stew and then the carrot cake is a really useful one and easy one to remember. So hopefully you remember that it is about that carrot cake, and it's about transcending those disciplines. And if we want to understand these human environments and environmental interactions, but also find or propose responses to those wicked problems, we do have to work together, and we do have to bring those different disciplines together, understand how they connect, to see how we can understand those problems better and propose more adequate responses. So that's the first point I wanted to make. Then I want to talk about the topic of the opportunities and challenges that were mentioned. I think, again, it's really interesting. So opportunities, as you can see, many. I think the first one is definitely the one on collaboration, but also communication, as we said. It's about finding that shared language. And it's, of course, not just about the linguistic language, which, of course, is also important, but also that shared transdisciplinary language, which can be a bit of a struggle to find at the start of the project, as you have heard, that once you have found that language, it becomes so much more exciting. And again, also that shared language is not just about disciplines in academia, but it's also about different stakeholders that we will work with. Right? And this also includes, as you've heard from today, stakeholders within the local community. So I think that's really, really important. That also brings us back to the other point that was made about understanding the local context. So we talk about, in our case, the 3 pillars of sustainable development: environment, social, and economic pillar. But it's also about the cultural context, the political context. How does that work? How does all of that fit within that local context that you will need to understand as researchers to be able to have an impact? We also talked about the actionable and impactful research. I think that's also very obvious from the project that you heard about today, but also have a look at the website from NOTS, have a look at the research that our PhD students, both here at Warwick, but also, there at Warwick, here in Chula, engage with. It's such exciting projects, such varied projects, and we have some PhD students here today, so do talk to them to understand what they work on. It's really worth listening to. But then, of course, challenges, plenty of challenges. You've heard that again in the presentations, but also in the discussions. It's time-consuming. Finding that shared language is difficult. But it's definitely worth it, but it will take time. It's also about listening, learning to listen to each other. And as we heard, also being respectful. No one is better than anyone else. And that is not just about the disciplines, but about the different stakeholders. So never forget that. But it is definitely despite the complexities of the type of research that we engage with, it's a hugely enriching experience. So I think that all of us will recommend you to engage with this type of projects and research. So finally, I just want to say that we're really excited to be here. We're lucky to have been successful with this grant application that has allowed us to start this collaboration, and hopefully will lead to much more. This is the first one of what we hope to become annual seminars, where we would involve you as students, but also our students at Warwick. Next time we might try to have it a bit later in the day because it's 6 a.m. in the morning. Now we're getting to 8 a.m. in the UK. So I'm not sure we've managed to convince many students to get up that early. But in the future, that's definitely our goal, to make sure we find a time that where all of us can participate. But we are also looking at other types of collaborations, joint modules potentially at master's level, exchanges of students. We already have PhD students. One of our PhD students is here today, and it works with the University of Chula, so it's really exciting. and other many different opportunities that we are looking at for the future. So I'm really looking forward to develop this further, and I'd like to thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll look forward to chat with you informally in the next session after the break. Thank you very much.
So the next session will be an informal meeting between med students and professors from Warwick. So there will be about 5 or 10 minutes break, and yeah. So for GSP students, I think the session for today is over. So if you would like to leave, yeah, feel free to. For med school students, please come back in 5 or 10 minutes. Ajahn Kan will come back to open the new session.